This is a Bang & Olufsen Beomaster 900 that I've put more work into than it'll ever be worth. But I thought we'd maybe get a video out of it at least. This thing, it's actually already repaired and working fine. It was exploded, the entire power supply had gone. Any Bang & Olufsen masters will see that that is not the original power transformer. And it's not the original rectifier harding behind there either. This came with a selenium rectifier that's absolutely giant, taking up the entire backside of the case there. And this thing had exploded the rectifier, the voltage regulator, it runs with a regulated 24-volt rail, and the power transformer, and the voltage selector on the back. So the entire power supply was just completely kaput on this thing. But I got it working, and nothing else is actually wrong. The power amplifier and radio and everything else seems to be working just fine. So I went to put this thing back together, and I noticed that it sounds awful. Now, this is a very early transistor amplifier. It's from about 1970. It's rated 6 watts per channel, and it's not particularly low distortion. I've measured it at like 1% distortion throughout most of its power range, which isn't good. But the real issue is the speaker cabinet, because this radio actually doesn't use two speaker boxes. These speakers, they share the central cavity for the electronics, and they're actually ported. They have a hole going into this large central area. So the entire electronics section needs to be properly sealed. And originally there was some very rotten foam around the backside. I put some modern foamy stuff on there, which is actually working fine. It seals well around the backside now. But the front panel is an issue, because this damn thing is just rattling around. Now, this seems to be a fairly unusual version of a 900, which has an external plastic faceplate, and most of them seem to be integrated into the receiver unit. But this one has an external plastic, and this thing rattles like mad and makes terrible farting noises through the buttonholes. And the reason for that is this thing is nicely clamped down along the bottom, but around the top it just it slides into a slot, and that's just not tight. I think there's supposed to be a nice soft springy rubber thing here which sort of clamps it together, but this is just not providing anywhere near enough pressure forward to keep this thing in place, so it just rattles around. And there also might have been some kind of foam or something around the buttons from the factory, which would have just disintegrated with time. They have a lot of this like ancient 60s foamy stuff. And this thing was just completely open around the buttons, and it was just sounding horrible. You could hear noise coming through every single button. So I cut up some open cell foam and put some holes in it with one of these lever things to seal that up. I've even got a second one, but I'm going to shove in there because it still makes button noises. And maybe we can get this thing sounding reasonable. Other than that, technically, this is actually a nice radio. It has excellent reception, even with the included rod antenna. I can pick up AM radio stations, which is usually a no-go here. In Europe, we don't do AM. This thing does not have the phono preamp, nor does it have the stereo decoder, so it's a mono FM radio and a stereo like tape aux player device. I wish I had the stereo decoder, but alas, they seem to be very hard to come by. It's also missing a couple of the knobs on the front, which is a real shame because it's otherwise in really good condition, nice and clean. But yeah, let's see if we can get the front panel back installed. I've put a very thin stripe of like automotive damping foamy stuff, stick-on stuff up there, which hopefully will allow this thing to seat properly. This stuff is very squishy, so it shouldn't compress the plastic and bend it too bad, and that should get rid of the rattling problem, because the top part of this, you could just hear it rattling back and forth. It was absolutely terrible, and I don't want to glue it in place. That seems not good. I also may need to do just to replace this side foam. because it's crumbling and falling to bits. And there we go, some fresh new foam lightly taped in place to replace the crumbling old stuff. I think we're pretty much ready to shove the front panel back on this case and see what happens. Alright, so I worded it up on the bench because I needed to adjust the radicator. The radio indicator. Get it? Radicator. This is just a signal level meter, and that's all tuned up nicely. It's a potentiometer on the bottom, easy to do. But I want to do some more measurements on this thing because it has a lot of distortion on the output. Like the THD plus N is like 1%, which is just so much by modern standards. I'm just fiddling around and looking at what we get out of it. So we have it hooked up to the HB339A. This is a distortion meter which puts out a really clean sine wave and measures everything else that's the amplifier's heading. And on the scope we're looking at the signal out of the amplifier. This is just the zoomed out waveform, and on channel B we have the distortion waveform. So this is all the non-linearities that the amplifier is adding. So we're currently at actually that's not a ton of distortion right now. Am I measuring right? Oh right, I have a bunch of filters on. So right now we're actually looking at a pretty decent performance for this thing. 0.3%, but we're filtering out everything over 30 kHz and everything below 400 Hz. So all the mains hum. It's just gone. If we add that in, it just starts dancing all over the place. So yeah, 0.3% distortion right now, which is still huge by modern amp standards. But this waveform is so really funky. Like usually you see really obvious like harmonic distortion where you have basically your fundamental wave is your is that, and you have like basically a couple of sine waves that are, you know, 2 or 3 times higher than the frequency, and those are going to be the dominating harmonics. But this thing just has this really funky thing going on. Like, what even is that? So there's certainly like some crossover distortion if we put these guys on top of each other. You know, this is going to be crossover distortion, that's going to be crossover distortion, because we're going from the positive output device to the negative output device. But all of this stuff is just like non-linearities in the amplifier, which is sort of just there across the entire amplitude range that we're putting out. And that's just like, you don't see that in a modern amp. You just do not see this kind of funky distortion waveform. That's really cool actually. So yeah, we do have a ton of crossover distortion because this thing doesn't actually have adjustable bias. It is a class AB amplifier. It doesn't just it's not just a pure class B. It does have some bias, but it has quite a low bias, like 12 milliamps through the outputs, and it's not adjustable. It's completely automatic. So there's no way for me to raise that without swapping out the component, and I kind of don't want to do that. I may do a full recap on this thing at some point. Might do it then, but yeah, that's just nothing to be adjusted. They've made a bias over circuit thingy, and we're just, yeah, that's going to be good enough forever. I mean, it's still working, but we have, I'm guessing like with crossover distortion we're seeing is because it's just got slightly lower bias than it's really happy with. Maybe it was good when the transistors were new, but it's not really ideal anymore. But yeah, the rest of that waveform is just completely bonkers. Like you don't see that. It puts a smile on my face to see something unique for once. Performance of this amplifier is also pretty bad. You can't bypass the tone controls. They're always active. And the tone controls are actually, they're fed by, they're included in the main feedback loop for the entire amplifier, which means that you can do a really fun thing with the treble control, because the treble control also amplifies all the high frequency harmonics on the output. So the treble control, it's at the bottom right now, but if we turn the treble up, our crossover distortion gets amplified, because the treble control just sees, the crossover distortion, that is just high frequency harmonics, and the treble control is just going like, yep, these are high frequencies, we are making more of them. So you can just adjust how much crossover distortion you want in your amp. The bass control is a lot more well behaved. That's the bass control being adjusted. Its biggest issue is that it adds a bunch more mains hum. Just because, hey, this thing is more than 60 years old. But yeah, that's the treble control thing. Just it gives me a good chuckle. Just like, yep, crossover distortion on, crossover distortion off. And to make matters worse, the frequency response of this whole thing is kind of weird, and it's really down on the high end. So you basically always run this with the treble control maxed, and the bass control of a minimum, just because that's the only way it sounds sane. Oh yeah, and also fixed the stereo indicator. That wasn't working before because the bulb was unscrewed. The frequency response of this thing is also really, really funky, because now we're measuring 1 kilohertz and we're in relative amplitude mode, and we're adjusted to about -10, so this is our reference level. So with the tone controls neutral, if we go to 10 kilohertz, that's just down by like what, 4 or 5 dB, and 20 kilohertz is down by an absolute shit ton. It's basically not there. But if we turn the treble control to max, now 10 kilohertz is ever so slightly up, and 20 kilohertz it's down like 10 dB. So we can do 10 kilohertz, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we're down like 5 dB by 15 kilohertz, and it's just rolling down because it's just, this is not a high bandwidth amplifier, that's to be expected. I think it's specified up to 15 kilohertz, and that's the highest number you'll find outside of a tuner. But you for this thing to be flat, you have to have a bass like almost ever so slightly up, and the treble maxed, and now it's sort of flat-ish. Like we can do, let's do 100 hertz. Now we're still up a shit ton at 100 hertz, so we can turn the bass down a little. There we go. The bass is almost at the bottom, so 100 hertz, 60 hertz. Yeah, it's ever so slightly down. Let's bring the bass ever so slightly up. There we go, now we're flattish at 60 hertz, 50, 40, 30. Yeah, so that's a decent low-end response from this sort of thing. If we go back to 1K, yeah, we're flat. 2K, 3K, now we're going up. 4K going up, 5K, up like 4 dB, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kilohertz, we're going down again. So 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Oh no, hang on, that's wrong. That's our actual 10 kilohertz. So 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So yeah, this thing is absolutely... it is nowhere near flat, no matter what you do. But like the fact you have to adjust the tone controls in such a silly manner to make it anywhere near flat is really funny. I don't think it's any failure because I've analysed it. The behaviour is identical on both the channels. I wouldn't expect a completely identical failure on both of them. Yeah, it's just doing its own little thing. So back to the case. I've reinstalled the front panel, and I also added some really sticky aluminium tape along the top edge just to keep it in place a bit better and provide some extra sealing. So I'm hopeful that that's going to stop a horrible rattling, which you didn't get it before on, but trust me, it sounded completely terrible. So let's get the receiver reinstalled. There we go, we have it back in the case. Please ignore the horribly incorrect knobs. You never saw those. Let's turn it on and tune it to a very local radio station. Turn the AFC on. So treble maxed, bass at the minimum. Oh yeah. This is so much better, wow. Oh my god. So previously, when using this thing, there was just a horrible chuffing noise coming through, and there's just none of that anymore. And this completely ruined the demo of the non-existent chuffing noise because this is a voiceover. The bass is actually turned up. You can see the knob there. If I use this thing with a bass at anything but minimum, the front was so loose that it would just... Well, it was so loose and leaky that it was just awful. It just sounded like complete and utter garbage. But now it's completely fine. There is a slight chuffing still through the buttons. But compared to how it was, that is absolutely fine. And you generally don't use this thing with the bass turned way up anyway. It's actually a very bassy speaker. It's such a small set of speakers in such a large enclosure. So you really don't need to have a bass turned up. We turn it up a little. There you go. That's a short little story about the this particular Beomaster 900. I need to get some new knobs on it and recap it, replace the bulbs at some point in the future, but I think I'm going to enjoy just using this for myself, and I have no intention of selling it. It's a nice little radio. Cheerio. And nothing so that easy, is it? So I noticed after installing it that there was actually cracks under the propagate along the center edge, and it's sadly actually kind of visible. And that's because this plastic just can't handle the leverage of a seam in here, because it just breaks this entire part inwards. So I've removed the original seam and added a different placement for the foam. So this foam will instead push slightly against the original backing thing here, and it will also push against the metal here, so that the chassis will push the front panel forwards, which will hopefully be enough force to stop it rattling, because this plastic actually gave way enough for it to start rattling again, just because there was no longer any pressure on the little gasket I made there. You can see we have a tiny bit of overlap there, so that it'll go above the plastic and touch the wood. That's like less than a millimeter, and there's a very slight lip on this side as well to give it a bit more grip against the aluminium backing of the receiver. I also added, it's important, these corners here actually don't have any sealing. This stuff can't reach because there's a slot there and it doesn't go that far. So there's foam around the corner there and a small piece on top. But I'm thinking that's okay because we have this big vertical bar. Now there you can see how the gasket sits inside the case. So we have a slot here with the original rubbery plasticky sealing thing, and this stuff just slots into that slot, and it's not really putting any pressure on the plastic faceplate, like going in that direction anymore. It's pretty good, and the receiver is now going to push up against this and essentially press the front panel forwards, which should stop the rattle. Here's to hoping. The corners went well. There's good sealant. There's essentially continuous foam all the way into the corners, so I think that's going to be good. And the bottom is not a problem at all because it has these screwy clamp things which hold it down. Really, the trickiest part is going to be this little area here, but I think I might just be cheeky and shove a bit of blue tack in there, because this was making farting noises when I was playing loud earlier. Now there's my cheeky blue tack to cover up the speaker wire pole thing, and we also have a little bit of extra foam there, and in this corner I've made an effort to really wrap the foam around the edge because it was leaking here, because there's just a fairly complicated geometry, because this sort of wraps around the inner lip here. There's like a slot cut in there. This wraps around. There's supposed to be foam along the lower edge here, which does a good job at sealing around there, and since this is wrapping around, it provides good positive pressure. But in this corner it's a bit tricky because it's just like a bunch of stuff and the wood is a bit worn. And there we have it back together, and it's okay now. The front panel is no longer vibrating. I can tell that if I hold my fingers here, there are very few vibrations. The wood cabinet is vibrating because this is a very long and thin piece, so this actually rattles up and down, and there's not much to do about that. Oof, that's too much bass. But most of the horrible farty noises are gone. The buttons are still pretty okay, but there's every leak I seal up puts more load on the poor foam here, so it's still a bit farty. On the back there are some leaks. I put some blue tack in each of these corners. It helps a lot because you just can't really get foam in there, and there are some small leaks through the connectors and stuff, so that's really unavoidable with a design like this. It's never going to be super tight, but this is now to a point where, well, it's basically the same as before I put it together last time, except that it's no longer breaking this front panel apart. It's mounted sturdily in this direction rather than this direction, which it just can't handle. And that sounds alright. The bass has turned out pretty high even.